How's it going, everyone? My name is Jovani and welcome back to another video. As you can see, I have a massive pile of parts here, some really cool stuff, and today we're going to be giving my 1976 C30 dually pickup some much needed upgrades. And the big piece here, kind of the driving force behind all of these upgrades, is this. This is the Holley Sniper EFI system. My C30 Crew Cab dually is equipped with a 454 engine, currently using a Holley double pumper carb. I think a nice upgrade would be this Holley Sniper EFI system. This is going to give us reliable, quick starts on our engine, whether it's cold, hot outside, whether we've been running it all day or not, which is crucial for a big truck like this that we're going to be using to work with. It's also going to give us that tunability to be able to add a camshaft in here later on. Whatever mod we're going to do to this truck, the Holley Sniper EFI will be able to handle it. And to pair along with the Holley Sniper system, we're going to go with the Holley Sniper EFI Hyperspark system. This is Holley's electronic ignition system that's going to pair perfectly with the Sniper EFI. That's going to allow us to have complete control of our ignition timing, in addition to the fuel control we already have with the Sniper EFI. This big box right here is going to be our new fuel tank. I decided to go with a brand new EFI fuel tank for the truck. That way we can put an in-tank pump that's pumping 60 PSI for this Holley system. That's also going to provide adequate cooling for the fuel pump. It's going to be more reliable in the long term than running an external pump. And then after all of these upgrades, a big thank you to Alloyworks for sending me this 4-core aluminum radiator with electric fans. This thing is going to be a huge improvement on the stock radiator that we have in there. This is going to allow the engine to remain cool no matter what condition it's in. So thanks again to Alloyworks for sending me this radiator. Now, just to be clear, Holley did not sponsor this video. I paid for every part other than the radiator out of my own pocket. If you guys do enjoy the content that I'm making, just let them know that I sent you there. If you guys do purchase any of these parts, again, just mention me to Holley, and hopefully that'll help me work something out with Holley in the future. Now, I did score a really good deal on this Sniper EFI system. Surprisingly, I know it doesn't look like it, but this is actually a refurbished unit. I picked this thing up for just about $800. Now, retail on one of these is about $1,300, so that is a huge score. That basically allowed me to buy the entire Hyperspark setup for the same price as I would getting one of these brand new. So I definitely recommend going to Holley's site directly and checking out their refurbished section, because you can sometimes score a major deal like this. So I think that's enough talking about the parts. Let's go ahead and start getting these things on. The first thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and handle this tank. This is going to be probably the most labor intensive thing we're going to do today. So I'm going to drop the driver's side tank and replace it with this. But first we have to get all 16 gallons of fuel out of that tank. So let's go ahead and unbox this thing and get it started. Now, for those of you that are going to be doing this on a square body like I am, the nice part about these tanks is that this is an OEM tank. This comes off of a 1987 R10 or 20 pickup. This one in particular should be a 20-gallon tank. They do also come in a 16-gallon tank. The 87 trucks were factory EFI, so the tank is already baffled and sumped for EFI, which makes it really nice. It's just a straight drop in. You just need to buy the fuel hanger assembly in a new fuel pump. This is a very nice tank. Let me get you guys in for a closer look. So I don't know how well you guys can tell from there, but this tank is coated in a nice, I'm assuming it's a rust resistant coating. So this tank should last the life of the truck as long as we take care of it. The other thing I'm noticing that you guys won't be able to see is the EFI baffling inside the tank. That's good, that's what we want. The carbureted tanks, they don't have a baffle at the bottom, so that fuel is always sloshing, you know, back and forth, left and right. And if you were to run low on fuel, you have the potential to starve the fuel pump, which we don't want to do. In this box, we have our fuel pump assembly. Now this one does actually include a fuel pump with it. However, I cannot confirm how much this fuel pump pumps out, so I opted to buy another Walboro fuel pump just in case this one does not meet the demands that we need. And here's that assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and swap out this fuel pump for the Walboro one that I have, just because I already know that that Walboro that I bought is able to handle 60 PSI and 255 liters per hour. And here's that Walboro pump. They do look very similar, if not almost identical. So I'll go ahead and keep this one around. You know, it might still be a good fuel pump. It's obviously not name brand, but you never know. Might be able to use it on something else. So now we're just gonna swap out the pumps. We're gonna just unplug the electrical connector on this one. Just like with our LS swap in the square body, we have to modify this fuel hanger to accept the Walboro pump. So I just made a little bit of an outline here of where this is going to kind of fit. I'm just gonna try it with the sander drum on the Dremel. If not, I'll use a cutoff wheel or whatever. But we're basically just gonna wanna modify this to be able to have this pump sit down into this recess here. Just spray off everything, and now we could drop our fuel pump in. These are fuel injection hose clamps. I like them a lot better than the regular ones. We'll assemble our bottom of the pump first. Okay, there's our fuel sock. Plug in our connector. The connector is not a direct fit, so we're gonna have to cut and splice. And we'll go ahead and put on our hose clamps. You wanna get that fuel pump pressed up against the bottom there, because I don't really like how it's rattling a little bit. Okay, that's nice and tight on there. Good to go. Now we just need to cut and splice these connectors. And for that, I'm going to be using these guys. You can get these at Amazon. They are just solder seal wire connectors. And you just basically pick your size. It's got a little drop of solder in the middle. So it's like a heat shrink connector with some solder in the middle. And so once you heat it up, that solder melts and makes a connection with the wires. And that's our completed fuel pump assembly. Everything's configured the way we need it to be. So now we can go ahead and drop this into the tank and get it ready to put in the truck. All right, so we got our tank up here. The last thing we'll need is this O-ring for inside the little locking mechanism thing there. And we'll also need the locking ring. There we go. All right. Okay, yeah, it's always a tight fit, but once you get everything lined up correctly, it shouldn't be too bad. There we go. Okay. Then we get our locking ring. There we go. Okay, here's the part that I kind of haven't been looking forward to. I know for sure there's probably at least 15 gallons inside this gas tank. Yeah. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Try not to tip it over. Get out of there, please. Okay, yeah, so obviously truck's not tall enough to get that out, so I'm gonna have to lift up from right here and just hope I can get it high enough. Okay, and after struggling a little bit, we finally got it out. Now we gotta get the straps off of it and get the new one in. And last thing we're gonna do tonight before it gets too dark is just connect our fuel line and leave it hanging. This side here is going to be our fuel pump. This side is going to be a vent, which we will cap off because I don't think we need it because the tank is vented itself. And then this side is our return line. So we'll go ahead and throw a hose on the feed and the return. That way we can just hang our tank up and then cut our hoses later on once we figure out what length we need. All right, last night, since it got dark, I decided to give these the, the SEMA build special, and I just used a 5-year-old can of spray paint and really just touched them up a little bit. All right, let's get this thing up in the truck and get it bolted in. All right, so I just rigged up a fuel pump into the old tank, and then I'm putting it into the fill neck of the new tank because I still need to get a new fill hose for the actual rubber line that goes to the tank itself. So, hopefully we'll be able to use all this fuel, fill up the tank one time. By the time I order that new fuel neck, I'll be able to put that on and get gas in the truck. I've already ran the hoses all the way up to the engine bay, but I gotta figure out where exactly I'm gonna need them. So we're gonna start with the Holley stuff now. All right, and now that we did all that, we get to do what hopefully is the fun part of all this. You can see I have my 2 fuel hoses here. I'll probably have to go under the truck one more time and get them kind of routed up and put a couple little clamps so that way they're not touching the exhaust or anything. But we'll need to put the Holley system on first so we know exactly where we're gonna need our hoses and what size we need. But I think the next thing we're gonna have to do is put a inline filter somewhere. So we'll actually do that. We'll probably crawl back underneath the truck and put it right on the frame rail. Okay, and as usual, we're gonna be using a cheap Amazon fuel filter. I mean, it's like 30 bucks. It's not the cheapest thing in the world. The nice thing about this is that you can take these apart and clean them out and, swap them as you need. And this one comes with a nice little mounting bracket that you could use. So we're gonna find a spot to put this underneath the frame. we've got our fuel filter mounted, all that, that's good. The next thing that I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna do the distributor part. In order to do that though, I think I'm gonna go ahead and remove the Holley carburetor just so we have this whole area clear, the whole intake's clear. All right, now before we go any further doing anything else, we want to go ahead and set our distributor at top dead center 0 degrees on the compression stroke. There's a couple ways to do that, and I'm going to show you guys 1 or 2 of them right now. But before we even do that, I'm going to go ahead and mark all the spark plug wires with a number, so that way we know which spark plug wire goes where, basically. 5. Okay, we'll go ahead and just lay our wires to the side there. And then what I'd like to do now is go ahead and just make a mark somewhere on the distributor and on your intake. So that way, worst comes to worst, we can always drop the distributor back in and it'll run. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and mark where our number 1 cylinder was, which was right here. I'm just gonna put a dot. We're gonna take the cap off, and then we're gonna rotate the engine until it says 0 degrees on the balancer and the rotor lines up with this number 1 position. I'll go ahead and just put a dot right here as well, so that way our rotor lines up with that line. We got our cap off, and before we go any further, I'm gonna go ahead and just put a couple pieces of duct tape over this intake so we don't accidentally drop anything in there. And now that we have the cap off, we're gonna shift our attention towards the front of the engine, and we're going to go ahead and kind of move some of these hoses out of the way. And I'm personally gonna go ahead and remove this metal fan, since we're gonna be dropping in a radiator with electric fans. We got that out of the way. Now we have more access to the front pulley here. Looks like someone has graciously welded on a socket onto the harmonic balancer, unless it came like that. But I mean, that's cool. Now we can start turning our engine. I've disconnected the battery, and obviously nothing can fire off because our cap's not on. One other cool thing that you could do, or another way to do this to verify that you're on the compression stroke, is one of these. This is a Mr. Gasket TDC whistle. The whistle is like a one-way whistle, so if it's sucking air, it won't whistle, but if it's blowing air, it will. So, and then if you suck on it, as long as it's whistling, once you get to the top there, as soon as it stops whistling, that's when you know you're at TDC. You can see our rotor is getting close. We're almost there. Okay, so we just passed it. So we go back. Okay, that's 0 right there. Rotor's lined up. We know we're on the compression stroke because of our whistle. At this point, now we can remove the distributor, and then we'll go ahead and install the Holley one. And now, should just be able to pull it out if our wires weren't in the way. Okay, there we go. And there's our distributor. Normally, installing another HEI or a similar distributor, you basically have to worry about meshing this and then having this point to our number 1 spark plug. However, with this, it really doesn't matter where it's going to sit. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just drop it in. I'm going to keep it, relative to where we had it before, keep this plug in the back. I'll show you the cool little installation tool that Holley gives you that you don't get with any other distributor. Also, I put my gasket on the distributor already. So the main idea behind this is that it's a Hall effect style distributor. It doesn't actually use points or anything like that. It's just a Hall effect sensor. So there's a magnet or a magnetic field that's generated, and the sensor just basically counts the number of times it hits the magnet in layman's terms. So now that we have that there, Holley gives you this nice little installation tool, and really all it is this little plastic cap. But with this, there's a little mark here. That's your mark for where the number 1 cylinder is going to be. So you basically just put this on here, just hold the thing on there, and we're just going to turn the base of the distributor until it lines up. And with that, this is going to be our mark for our number 1 cylinder. Really cool, kind of ingenious. And then what you do is you that there. Good enough. But yeah, that's our distributor. At this point, we can lock it down. All right, so right now, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of dry fading things to see where they're gonna line up. Thinking about putting the coil, you know, somewhere right here. All right, so now that the coil is on there, I'm gonna probably cut this cord down to where it's just long enough to reach to the distributor, cut this end off, put this end on the distributor, and then attach this guy to this end. So we've got our coil all configured now with the wire going to the distributor. It's still a little loose. I need one more screw in there, but I'll worry about that later on. Next, I'm going to go ahead and install this CDI box. I'm thinking over here, let me see about over here on this other side. All right, so actually I found a nice little spot kind of tucked away down here, nice and flat. So I might actually just run it down here. There doesn't seem to be anything that's gonna obstruct it or run into it, so I think this is a good spot. It's away from all the heat and everything too. So I think we'll run it right here. We got that all together. Now I just gotta run my wires across. Okay, and here is the piece de la resistance. We're gonna just get this gasket on here. Okay. All right, so now that we have the bulk of the hardware on here, we have our Holley Sniper EFI Hyperspark system installed. We have our Sniper EFI main throttle body assembly installed. The rest of this is going to be a lot of wiring. And then we do also need to crawl back under the truck one more time to install our O2 sensor. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and get that installed. Okay, so here's another one of those kind of ingenious solutions by Holley. This is our O2 sensor bung. Now, on the surface, looks pretty straightforward, but I have not seen anyone else do what Holley has done here. I've worked with other EFI systems before, and none of them have a solution like this. This is our oxygen sensor bung. It comes with the gasket, and it comes with 2 T-clamps. And now, obviously, the genius behind this is all we have to do is drill a hole that matches up to this size. Drill a hole in our exhaust at a good angle for the O2 sensor. So if this is our exhaust pipe, we obviously don't want the sensor down here. We don't want the sensor below basically this horizontal line here. So having it up at maybe a 10-degree angle on either side would be best. So that way, if condensation gets on the bottom of the pipe, it's not going to touch the tip of the sensor. Our hole is going to be drilled in our exhaust pipe about 10 inches after the collector. Mount this guy on top of there with these clamps, put the gasket behind it, and we have a nice tight seal for our oxygen sensor. And we shouldn't get any exhaust leaks. So this is a really quick, easy system. If you already have an O2 sensor bung somewhere downline in your exhaust, I would use that. It just has to be within 10 inches of the collector and no more than 24 inches, I believe. I'll go ahead and put that information right here on the screen. But yeah, this is a super easy solution. I'm just gonna get down there with a Christmas tree drill bit and drill this hole out. Okay, so we're down underneath the truck one more time. And right now, what we're trying to do is figure out where exactly we need our oxygen sensor to be. Now, there's a few things you have to consider. This is our collector right here. Holley recommends it between 1 and 10 inches after the collector. So that gives us quite a big range. I'm gonna go for right in the center, you know, about 6 inches after the collector. And then our other thing is we need to make sure that we have enough clearance for the actual sensor itself. We don't want the sensor to be bumping into anything, rubbing against anything, etc. Somewhere in this range is looking like it might work. So I forgot to grab a marker, but what I'm gonna do is just use this screwdriver to hopefully make a circle of where I want this. And then the other tricky part is obviously we're limited to how much room we have to drill this actual hole out. So as long as I could get close, right here seems to be about the best angle I could get the drill bit at. So I'll go ahead and drill my hole there. So we'll get our gasket, we'll get our clamps ready. Now obviously, if you want to weld your own bung on, you can. I could do, because I have oxygen sensor bungs. I have a welder, but this just seems like an easier solution. And supposedly it should work just as good as if I were to weld one. So, okay, we're just gonna slide our clamps in place. We got to get everything centered up. Okay, so as long as our hole is centered up, which I'll use my finger to do, we can go ahead and tighten down these clamps. As long as I can stick my finger in there and I'm not, you know, rubbing against anything, we should be okay. So let me grab a wrench. Keep checking our hole, make sure we still have clearance. Okay, and there's our oxygen sensor bung. Now I'll go ahead and grab our sensor. And the important thing to know is that we're not going to turn on the Holley system if we're not going to start the engine when we have our O2 sensor installed, because that could lead to, you know, failure on the spark plug end. Don't ever run the engine if the O2 sensor is not hooked up but installed inside the exhaust, because that can also lead to it burning up. This is a Bosch LSU 4.9 sensor, which is a really common O2, wideband O2, just in case you need a replacement. All right, let me grab a wrench and we'll snug that up all the way. There we go. That's tight. And then our cable, we're gonna wanna route in a way that it's not gonna get burned up by the exhaust. Okay, try to leave it in a spot where I can grab it. And we're done down here on the oxygen sensor. Okay, so the next item we need to install is the coolant temp sensor. Now I'm looking at this plug and it looks almost identical to an LS style one. I'm hoping that it's not, but the threads might be metric. As you can see, we have a aftermarket aluminum intake. It's a Edelbrock Performer 2.0 to be exact. I'm gonna try to remove this plug and see if this thread's in there. I can tell you right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be even close. So we're gonna have to come up with a solution. Either buy a different temperature sensor or find another hole, which I don't see there's anywhere on this intake. We're gonna have to see what we can do as far as this goes. Let me take this plug out, see what size we need, and then we'll figure it out after that. Okay, so quick trip to the Lowe's and I got an adapter. This is a 1/2 inch to 3/8 inch NPT adapter. This should fit, hopefully it does, and this is gonna fix our issue. I'm just gonna do this till it's nice and tight, because MPT threads are a taper thread, so the further you get the plug in, the better it seals. Or I guess the sealing doesn't start till you get the plug further in. Okay, that's pretty tight. Now we have a coolant temp sensor installed on our 454, and then we're just going to go ahead and plug in this sensor since we are done with it. That completes the coolant temp sensor installation, and now it's time to move on to the main harness. Okay, so now that we're onto the wiring itself, there's a few things that we need to keep in mind. We want to keep all wiring away from hot objects, sharp objects, any moving objects. So as we're doing this, we're going to be trying our best to avoid that and using tie downs, zip ties, any kind of holding clamps or anything like that to keep the wires in place. The first wire that we're going to want to deal with, which is going to be the easiest one to deal with, is going to be our O2 sensor harness. This one I'm going to work behind the cylinder head and down to where we have our O2 sensor. And then as we're doing this, we'll go back and kind of zip tie them or mount them into a spot where it's a little bit safer for it and a little bit tighter. So that one's ready to get plugged in down at the bottom. And then all we have left are these two big plugs, and I'll explain these now. All right, so the first of the two big plugs, this is what I'm gonna call the main power plug. What I'm gonna do first, before connecting anything though, is I'm gonna go ahead and mount our relay and fuse to the truck itself. I'm gonna mount them right here by the coil, and that will kind of lock everything in, so that way we kind of know where everything needs to be routed. Put these in with some self-tappers right here next to the coil. On the big end of this plug, we have our two power cables. This is our battery and our ground. And then we have our fuel pump send. What this wire will do, this will connect directly to the fuel pump positive wire. So this one's gonna end up going down the length of the truck. probably crossing over and going to our fuel pump. Let's start with the battery cables. These ones I'm going to follow the same path that I already have battery cables running, and then this will just connect to the positive and negative once we crimp on some ring terminals. So Holley does provide some split loom in the package, but I'm going to go ahead and opt to just use some of my loom that I carry on hand, and I'm just going to wrap it around these two power cables. That way we can kind of match everything else that's going on here, and it provides a little bit of protection. Okay, so we went ahead and ran this blue fuel pump wire all the way down the length of the frame, and then crossed over and connected it to, in my case, the gray wire, which is the fuel pump turn on wire for me, and then the other wire was our fuel sending unit wire. That would be the purple one. So we connected the purple back to the factory fuel sending unit, and then this blue wire to the gray fuel pump positive wire. Okay, and then moving on down the line, we have this is our distributor pigtail wire, and then it came with this little adapter here, so we connected that. It's a green, purple, and pink wire. And then on this harness that we've been working on here with the fuel pump relay and all that, there is, as you can see, a blue and green wire. So we're going to connect those two together. It should only connect in one way. There it is. And then we're just going to make sure that the green goes to the green and the purple goes to the purple. Once that's done, we connect that. And then this pink wire, this is going to be our 12-volt switched ignition source. We're going to end up connecting this to the old distributor wire. So I'm going to leave that there so we can do that. And then the last two wires on this connector, we have this pink, which will also be connected to the old distributor wire. This is 12-volt switched power. And then we have this coil negative input. In our case, we're not going to need this wire, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and trim it down and then go ahead and tape it just like that. That way we still have a little bit of wire in case, you know, something switches in the future, but also it just stays out of the way and doesn't short out on anything. Okay, and then the last connection that we need to make is the Holley 10-pin connector, is what it's called in the instructions. This is the one that's just a bundle of wires with a plug at the end. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and loom all this stuff up first. These are going to be your inputs and outputs, basically. So I would not remove any of these pins. I would just keep them tucked away and wrapped up if you're not going to use any of them. But we are going to be using a few of these. The main one we need right now is that white one to connect to our coil. But a few more that we will probably end up using is the AC ones. So there's an AC trigger and an AC ground, I think, or kick down, shut down, whatever you want to call it. But those are going to become important for us, or for me in particular, because I have AC on this truck and I want the engine to idle up when the AC is on. Right away, I'm going to get this white wire. This is our coil wire, our points output. Oh, and then a few of these will actually trigger fans for us, so that's what we want as well. So we want light blue, I believe, electric fans, that is. Okay, so now all of the main wiring that is required for the system to run and basically work, that's all complete as far as I'm aware of. I followed all the wiring diagrams and all that, and everything should have the power that it needs, so we should be good there. Now that that's done, it's time to handle these fuel lines. Luckily for us, Holley puts 6AN fittings directly onto the unit itself. I believe this side is going to be our inlet, which is the driver side. This side is going to be our return, which is the passenger side. We have our two hoses up here already. And now obviously we're going to cut these back a little bit, and then I'm going to mount these up to the firewall itself so that way they stay out of the way. Got to just figure out what length we need these, what kind of fitting we're going to need, and we'll be good to go from there. Both of our AN hoses are hooked up. We have no idea if they're working or leaking yet. We'll figure all that out later. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the duct tape off of the throttle body since we're not going to be making any more messes up here. And at this point, I believe we are pretty much done with everything that's required for it to run. We still need to do this pigtail harness, AC, and fans. But as far as everything else, I think we are good. We have our inlet, we have our return, we have our fuel pump connected. Hopefully that was the right wire. We'll find out. Everything else is good. I think all that's left to do is hook up the connections here at the battery and we'll turn it on and see what happens. I forgot to show you guys, I did connect the harness for the touchscreen display. That's just right there. We obviously still need to tidy up everything back there, but I think right now it's probably best that we just go for a test run. Also, I think I did this late last night, so I don't think I got it on camera, but you can see right here, this is our touchscreen harness wire. And I did drill and make a new grommet down there, and it's just sitting right here on my dash for now. I think it's time to hook up the keys and turn it on and see what happens. Okay, I heard some relays clicking. I'm just gonna sit here for a second, make sure nothing starts on fire or anything like that. Okay, so I'm in the truck, a little bit nervous, not gonna lie. I'm just gonna turn the key on, and we're gonna look at the unit here to see if anything happens. We have power to the unit. Okay, doing this with one hand here. Initial wizard. This is the, I'm pretty sure this is the 510 4150. So next, number of cylinders, 8. Target idle speed would be, let's say, let's call it 800 for now. Cam type, this is going to be a stock mild cam. No power adders. RPM to sniper ignition type. We're using a Hyperspark distributor. Wide open throttle ignition timing. I'm going to be conservative and say maybe 20 degrees of timing. This is wide open throttle timing as well. I'm sure we can do more than this, but let's just do 20 for now. I don't know what that means. But whatever, let's go. Oh, that's like our little tune name. Okay, I can hear my fuel pump just turned on. Oh, I hear a leak. Okay, we got a leak probably at the fuel filter, I'm assuming. I might have installed it backwards, maybe it just deadheaded, or those fittings weren't tight enough. So let's check that out. Okay, back in the truck. I figured out the fuel leak. It was the fuel filter like I suspected. However, it wasn't that I was deadheading the pump. It was that the fuel filter I bought was absolute fucking garbage. And it was basically the threads on the AN adapters were so fucking bad. Tolerances were so bad on it that it was just allowing fuel to flow right past them. Moral of the story is, don't buy that one. I'm going to put a link to the one that I always use and what I just replaced it with because I had an extra one on one of the vehicles, which is the Evil Energy fuel filters. Anyway, now we're here. We have fuel. Let's go ahead and turn our ignition back on. Holley's doing this little thing. Okay, I'm just listening for any more leaks. And I think at this point I'm going to give it a crank. I'm a little scared, not going to lie. Okay, that was my starter not really lining up right. Oh, I totally forgot. I have to disconnect the fuel line from the pump, from the old factory pump. Okay, fuel pump's been disconnected. All right, I'm ready to try it again. Give it one pump. It did pop off for a second. The Holley's still gonna have to kind of tune itself, so let's try it again. Now it's not really doing much. It did pop off for a brief second, so I'm not gonna roll anything out yet. Let's try it again. We're not getting anything. All right, we got nothing. We're not even popping off, so I'm just not sure. We did pop off once. I don't know what's going on here. I have a feeling it's a timing thing. It's got to do something with the Hyperspark. Cranking and ignition timing is set to 15 degrees, so that should work. Okay guys, holy crap. I just troubleshot this thing for honestly about an hour, 2 hours. You can tell it's already dark. A couple things I learned, okay? One, I verified my fuel pump situation like multiple times. I ended up just removing both of the hoses, seeing which one was the inlet, and connected it to the inlet, which is this side, driver's side. Hooked up the return to that side. So all that's good now. I wasn't confident that I was getting a good spark. I don't know, it could have been a mixture of things. So this orange and brown wire that connects to the coil, this is a high interference wire. So basically, as you can see temporarily, I just moved it away from like everything that I can. Second, Holley says like very specifically, make sure that you connect the CDI box, positive and negative, directly to the battery. I did not listen to them. I thought I knew better. I didn't. So as you can see right now, this is all just temporary, but I have literally the wire like wrapped together running to the battery. Same thing with the ground. Ground is like strapped together running to the battery and just like wrapped around the battery terminal over there. Second or third, I don't even know what we're on yet, coil wire that I had there, I like had to snug it down really hard and I finally heard it click on both ends. So that could have been the issue. I verified with a spark plug tester. I was getting like an intermittent spark, and with these Hypersparks, this is basically a CDI box, that spark is very bright, so I knew that I was getting some sort of spark. I ran the configuration again, the setup wizard again, like maybe 3 times, and then finally things started kind of registering. Like the TBI unit was not really noticing what it was, I guess. It wasn't recognizing any of the sensors, the O2 sensor, all that. Now, I just turned the key, and I got something. Key on, you can hear the fuel system. And we're gonna go to monitor, multi-gauge, vitals. All right, and let's see what happens. We're getting something, but we're not learning yet, I guess. Didn't like that. That was very loud too. So we're gonna cycle. Now that it did all that, maybe it got a little bit of data. I don't think it's in learn mode, which is our problem. So let's try that one more time. Okay, there we go. It's very lean right now, so it's gonna reach in up. No idea why it just turned off. Our target AFR is 11.5. There we go. It's learning, it's catching itself. It didn't catch itself that time. Yeah, it's just shutting itself off. I don't know why.